All right, welcome into the Illini Inquirer podcast. It is Jeremy Werner, joined by a former Illini guard, Illini Inquirer basketball analyst Mike LaTulip, joining us to talk about the start of Big Ten play, as well as a game against the number one team in the country this Saturday at State Farm Center. Mike LaTulip, how are you, buddy?
Doing well. I feel like we're in the thick of it
Feels
now.
like it's
Now you
basketball season now, right?
yeah, you start getting once there's the layoff in between end of regular season football to bowl season. Now it's like, I'm always my attention's always on basketball, but it feels like for most people it's starting to turn to hoops.
For sure. It's transfer portal season for football, but it's actually basketball season right
Yeah.
now. All right. So 1-1 start to Big Ten play. We will break down the nitty gritty here, but let's start big picture here first and focus on a game that happened a couple of days ago. But I think people want to hear from you, Mike, about what happened at Northwestern. You get a 10-point lead with about 10 minutes left in that game. So what led to that late collapse for Illinois?
Yeah, I mean they should be sitting at 2-0 right now. Really. I thought they played it in Northwestern's hands a bit just with the pace. I thought they slowed things down so much that it allowed a really good half court defense to set their really good half court defense. And so that was definitely a component of it. The offensive rebounding, which we saw definite carryover in a good way from with what Brad wanted out of them, what they were able to do in the Wisconsin game. It just wasn't good enough in the Northwestern game. You miss 42 shots, you only get 7 back. And that's how we always looked at it. When we would go into the locker room after a game or the next day when we would do film, it was the first thing that Gross would show on the board was, did we get 30? We wanted like 34%, 35% was the number we wanted to be at, getting that back on the glass from our misses. You get, if you only get 7 of 42, like they did at Northwestern at 16% or whatever, that's just not good enough. It's not good enough with the size that team has. And it's definitely not good enough for how many threes you want to shoot. Like if you want to shoot a lot of threes, you better be getting a good amount of them back, or else it feels like you're burning possessions at times if they're not really quality looks. So I thought that, coupled with, just how tough Northwestern is when it was kind of a taste of your own medicine from last year. And with Marcus Damask, where when he gets into that, back downs, Barclays, whatever you want to call them, and you're just kind of at their mercy, it can be tough, but it puts more of an emphasis on what you do offensively as well. So a collection of things, but certainly some improvement from Northwestern to Wisconsin.
All right, but then they bounce back, obviously, against Wisconsin. They take care of home court. Did have a couple issues closing out that game, but they find a way to do it. What stood out to you in the way they bounced back at home?
Yeah, you touched on a much better job, I thought, closing things out. And I think guys are still learning how to play with one another. It's just natural for a team at this stage, but the next step is learning how to win together. And who's our guy at the end of the game that we want the ball, we want the ball in their hands. I think it's pretty clear at this point. And I think all the other guys are bought into that too, which is equally as important. And so, a guy like KJ, if he can get to the line at the end, really good free throw shooter. Tre knocked down some big free throws as well. So you need to make free throws and you need to get stops in big moments. And I thought on the whole, they did such a good job of clogging gaps and not allowing Tanji and Blackwell and Klesmit, these guys that have really lived in the paint to start the season, to get to the free throw line at the rate they've been getting to the free throw line. And they're the number one free throw shooting team in the country. So that was a huge, I thought, win from a scouting standpoint, from an execution standpoint. And, that's what you need to do. You need to protect home court in this conference. Because I really do believe the winner of this conference isn't going to exceed 14 wins. Most likely. If you do, you're probably going to be the clear outright winner. But you got to take care of home court, because if you can go 9-1 on your home floor, split the road, now you're looking at 14 wins. So it's why that Northwestern one was huge the other night, but it's also why not falling to 0-2 when you got all these other teams. Like there's only 4 Big Ten teams right now that are 2-0 or 1-0. I think 3 are 2-0, and then Indiana's only played one game and beat Minnesota. So you're only a half a game back basically from being in first place in the conference.
All right, Mike, I sit there and I try to enjoy as much as I can about Kasparas Jakucionis because I try not to be hyperbolic, but we haven't seen this at Illinois. A guy who's no doubt a top 10 draft pick, in my opinion. That's a one and done. We've never seen a one and done at Illinois. He's the best freshman I've seen at Illinois, and we've seen Iowa and Kofi here. So what we're seeing from Kasparas is special. But for you, what impresses you the most about what you're seeing from him 9 games into a short college career here?
I'm trying to think where to go with this because there's a lot of
just give me whatever you got on Kasparas.
There's a lot of avenues with him. The first thing that sticks out, and these two things are really coupled together, is, and part of it is because he's been a pro for, it feels like years before this and carries himself that way, but just the unwavering confidence in his game. I think he's got some real shit to him. He really does on both ends. I think you see him, you can see him talking sometimes during games. He gets fired up. And I think that, that gets people excited about you too. Like they want to see that you have that. He's very businesslike, but when you play with emotion and just seeing how he is with his teammates, he's always running over, picking up guys. I think they genuinely enjoy playing with him. But also just, from a basketball standpoint, the conditioning, like his conditioning is insane. Just all, he competes on the defensive end, the load that he's carrying offensively, and he just never seems like he's tired. And that wears on the opposition. And so it's amazing to see, a kid doing this in his first year of college basketball. He's shown that he can be depended on in close games. He's shown that he can be a go-to guy. And I think as a viewer, you don't sit there kind of holding on for dear life when he has the ball in his hands. I think there's a calmness, I think, that comes over you. And although he's turned it over, that he's going to get it back with more plus plays, which is great. And then I think too, just seeing how he stacks up just numbers wise. All the things that were coming out on the broadcast, they're like, here are the high major players that have averaged 13, 6, and 6 in the last, whatever it was, 15 years. It's at least 15 years because Evan Turner was on there. Yeah. But it's Evan Turner, it's Denzel Valentine, it's Lonzo Ball, it's Kyle Anderson. It's a lot of really damn good players. And that wasn't like a freshman list. Right. That was just players. And then I saw another tweet that was like, the last freshman to have 80 points, 25 rebounds, 20 assists, and 15 threes in a 4-game stretch was Trae Young. Right. And he had one of the best freshman seasons of all time. So you see the company that he's in, that's impressive to begin with, but he's a guy that you can just get behind because he's about the right things. And I think he's playing at an All-American level right now. And if he continues doing it, they're going to be right in the thick of it for that Big Ten title.
So you watch way more college basketball than I do. Among the college guys that you've seen, like where's he rank on your NBA draft list right now? It's 9 games in. I get it, but
as far as point guards go, it's pretty much him and Dylan Harper.
Yeah. If it weren't for Dylan Harper, he'd have a real chance at Big Ten Freshman of the Year.
Yeah, for sure. I think he still does, to be honest. Because, if Illinois goes ahead and wins the Big Ten, Rutgers will be probably more middle of the pack. They're going to lose some games for sure. And if their numbers are remotely comparable, then he can still win Big Ten Freshman of the Year. Because there may be, because I know it's media and coaches that vote on it. So I think most times people give the nod to, if it's comparable, give the nod to the team, to the guy that won more. So that's certainly possible. But yeah, he's like you saw him in the top 20 range at the start of the season, and then he kind of crept into lottery. Now you're starting to see like top 5, top 10 talk. And honestly, I don't think it's crazy. Because of his skill set and his size and his demeanor, what he's about. He's a guy that when he gets into workouts for pre-draft, when teams, try to dig for intel on him, they're going to like a lot of that. So those are the guys that just kind of continue to rise as the season goes on and as, the pre-draft process plays out.
All right. So him and Kylan Boswell, it feels like they're kind of doing what Trent and Io did, where it was like it took a little time, but it didn't take that much time. It felt like 4 or 5 games, and these guys have kind of figured out how to play together. What are you seeing chemistry-wise between those two, Mike? Because right now they look like one of the best backcourts in the country.
Yeah, it's a great balance. It's a great marriage between those two. And you can look at it from a basketball standpoint and say, hey, what KJ is able to do offensively allows Kylan to play more within himself offensively, play probably more of a natural role offensively and not have to put too much strain on him on that end. And then defensively, what Kylan's able to do defensively allows KJ to really not overexert himself on that end. Although I think he's been really underrated on that side of the ball. I think that's going to be another piece when you look at the NBA draft status of him and his stock. Like that's going to be things teams dig into and I think really like, because he moves his feet well. He's got great anticipation. He can test shots. But the biggest thing with those two, and I talked to Kylan with Field 68 after the game and just asked him about, I was like halfway through asking my question about Kasparas, and he was like already shaking his head and was like, dude, yeah. Like, it's like he said, it's like being with a pro basketball player every single day. And he said, he's like, hey, you know, he'll ask me what I'm seeing and ask me for advice and stuff. And I think when he was talking to me, he's like, hey, I haven't really told him this, but like, he really inspires me because of how he goes about his business. And, you know, Kylan, although he's a vet, he's still 19 years old.
Right.
So I think Kylan needed, you know, as much as maybe Kasparas needed Kylan as a quote unquote vet, and he is a vet, Kasparas or Kylan needed Kasparas, because it's just like, I think it's centered him a little bit, and it's allowed him to not have to, you know, get too worked up about like my role within the offense. And it's like, hey, we know we got KJ, so I'm gonna be aggressive when I got the ball in my hands, make the right decisions offensively, but defensively, like that's where I live. And that's just, I don't think you get that if you don't have that pairing. I think it would feel a little bit more disjointed early on if you paired Kylan with, you know, just AJ Storr, right? It would just feel more like a push and a pull than the marriage that it feels like right now.
And you mentioned it, Mike. But it just feels like with Kylan feels like he's taking more of the creator distributor role a little bit more often, and that allows Kasparas to just be killer scorer,
a damn good scorer.
I can go be my elite scorer, because early on he was feeling his way out. What am I for this team? And it felt like he had to get everybody else involved. Like, it's like, you're the best scorer on this team. Go do it.
Yeah. Well, he also realized that he can get to the rim.
Yeah,
Kylan.
Yes.
And he even talked about that on, you know, when we were doing some of the Field 68 stuff, and said, you know, hey, at Arizona, I was just so used to them being so paint centric, get the ball into the post, and there's never room for him to drive. Now he's seeing, hey, we're more spread out. I can actually get downhill. I'm athletic. We talked about it for weeks.
Yeah.
But to see him consistently do it has been really awesome, because he's able to get to the free throw line more. That settles you down more as an offensive player. But you're right. I think he's underrated as a facilitator. After that 5 turnover game in the opener, he's been just unbelievable taking care of the ball throughout the course of these next 8 games or whatever it is. So yeah, it's been fun to watch. And I think just the way they pick each other up and the way they support each other has been the coolest thing of all to me.
Yeah, last 6 games for Kylan Boswell, 12.7 points, shooting 60% from 2. He's shooting 21% from 3, so he's struggling there, but doing great in the paint. And he's getting almost 5 free throws a game, 4.3 assists to 1.8 turnovers. So just been huge for him. Do you notice how the days are shorter, but your to-do lists aren't? Power through your busy days with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. From breakfast to dinner and anything in between, Factor has easy, nutritious options to keep you fueled and feeling your best. Whether you like routine or you enjoy mixing things up, Factor has you covered with 35 different delicious meals every week and over 60 additional convenience options you can add to your box, like keto cookies, pressed juices, and smoothies. Factor lets you do you. Choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat, or simply eat well balanced. And check this out. Factor is cheaper than takeout and dining out. Put the money you save towards holiday shopping or reaching your financial goals. So don't let shorter days slow you down. Stay energized with America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service. So right now, head to factormeals.com/50Illini and use code 50Illini to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code 50Illini at factormeals.com/50Illini to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping while your subscription is active. All right, Tre White, his best game as an Illini against Wisconsin, 23 points, gets to the free throw line 10 times in that game, but what does that Wisconsin version of Tre White bring to this team? And how do they keep getting something similar? I'm not saying 23 points, but how do they keep getting that out of Tre White?
Yeah, for him, it's 4 things he has to think about on a nightly basis. And, luckily for guys like Tre White, their job is pretty simple, right? And not simple in the sense of like how you go about there and execute it, because it's a really tough league. It's a really tough competition. But your mindset going in should be simple, and it's play with activity. It's, be a menace on the offensive glass. It's be a menace defensively. And it's selectively put pressure on the rim. And that's really all he has to think about on a nightly basis. And so it's not always going to be in the form of 23 points every night. He may not score more than 23 the rest of the season.
Right.
That's possible. But that doesn't mean that he can't make just as big of an impact as he did in that Wisconsin game. There's sometimes I think when he exceeds like the 4 dribble mark, things go awry. So there maybe can be some more simplification there. But by and large, if he emerges as, a really dependable 4th option, and sometimes in some games 3rd options, in some games maybe 2nd option, like we think about like how big Jacob Grandison was for this team, as just a guy that you knew every game was like, hey, you know what? I know what I'm gonna get from him. Like he's a connector. You can kind of play through him without being a ball stopper. That's what Tre needs to be, because he's really talented and he's got really good size, and you can see with a guy like him playing in a functional program, like one that is not dysfunctional. He's a pretty darn good player.
Yeah, obviously it's been a couple rough games for Ben Humrichous. The 2 last games have been really poor. What's led to that, Mike? And what are Underwood's adjustments to that? Because I'll just throw it out. I put it out in the last podcast, but just to bring it up with you, like you can't just bench him. You can't just like throw him into a 10-minute a game player, right? So anyone that's thinking that, and I'm sure it's a minority of fans, but you do need to get more out of him, or you might need to find, different combinations of guys. So what do you think of just what the last 2 games have been for him? Is it just missing shots, or are teams exposing something?
I've been a tad bit confused about the perception of Ben these past few games. It certainly hasn't been his best,
right,
by any means. But this notion that like he shouldn't play starters minutes and should go to the bench, I personally don't see that. And look, offensively, I think he's still adjusting. I mean, this is a guy that had the ball in his hands a ton at Evansville and is adjusting to being a guy that is more of a spacer, like a pure spacer now. And I think that's led to him just being a bystander a lot in these games. And I think there's more opportunity for him in some cases with the way he's being guarded, because teams are still, despite his shooting slump, he's still shooting 35%, and teams are treating him like he's a shooter. So I think there's opportunity for him to put the ball on the deck a little bit more and to be a little bit more aggressive to the basket and finishing around the basket. I think he had Kamari McGee on him in the game against Wisconsin and just threw it back out. And so those are some of the things that I think offensively he can work on. But the shooting stuff, I mean, Alfonso Plummer had a stretch where he was 4 for 21.
Yeah.
And think about how good of a shooter he was. And Alfonso wasn't some plus defender either.
Well, and you mentioned it, Mike, like he's still shooting 37% from three despite 2 of 14 the last 2 games. Like I'm not concerned about him making shots. It's going to happen. It's just up and down throughout a season. You know that.
Yeah, and I think, but the bigger thing that I'm seeing from people is the defense, and and we'll show the film so that people can see it. But yeah, I mean the Northwestern game, part of it I think is heightened because it's Northwestern, but seeing what Nick Martinelli did to Humrichous, and honestly what he did to KJ on some occasions, and what he did to Tre White on some occasions, like he's doing that to everybody.
It's good.
I mean, that's like, I mean, think about Tyler Wall. I thought really competed on Marcus Damask last year. It just didn't matter.
Yeah.
Like Marcus was that good. And Martinelli, I think, has really come on. So I don't necessarily fault Ben for that. I mean, there are some things, and we'll show in the film, staying down on shot fakes, some of your positioning when you're returning back to the ball, not getting split on, if they do come over to double. We'll talk about those things. But the Wisconsin game, people see, and it's what's tough about being in the position Ben's in, is because they're basically putting him as like a gap plugger, and he's typically guarding the worst shooter on the other team because they want a guy at 6'8", 6'9" to deter driving lanes. So when you come off a ball screen and Kylan's fighting over, you got Ben Humrichous at 6'9" sitting in that gap. Like if you want to wonder why Tanji and Blackwell and Klesmit didn't get all the way downhill and didn't shoot free throws, Kylan is a big reason for that. Tre White's a big reason for that. Kasparas is a big reason for that. But I'll show you the film. Ben Humrichous is a big reason for that too. Like he understands like his off the ball awareness and how he rotates, getting in gaps, and what that does is allows Kylan and Tre White to be more aggressive on the ball, because there's not this margin for error where you have no other help. Like that was the team's issue last year. They weren't as good as helpers. And so Terrence can be really aggressive on the ball, but then these guys are getting past him and getting downhill if he over pursues. So it's a different type of role that he's in defensively. So if you see Carter Gilmore hit a 3, that's not on, that's the scout.
Mm-hmm.
You want the guy who's a 16% career three-point shooter shooting threes. Nolan Winter hits a 3, 32% three-point shooter. That's fine. We don't want it to be Klesmit, Tanji, or Blackwell. Now, when he hits a 3 and then you close out to him the next time, you can't leave your feet and have him get downhill for a layup and N1. Right. So like there's definitely mistakes that have taken place on the defensive end for Ben, but understand the role that he's in on that end. Like he did the same thing as like a gap plugger against Alabama, and freaking Grant Nelson hit 4 threes, right? Mullins hits his first 3 at, he's guarding Mullins, which I thought he did a great job. Again, offering help on Barnheiser and offering help on Martinelli. Mullins hits his first 3 in like forever. And so, but he missed a few others too. So like all defenders aren't built the same, right? Like his impact on the ball isn't going to be the same as Kylan Boswell's. But all the other stuff, like it is a luxury to have a guy like him at 6'8", 6'9", to be with his awareness in gaps and deter driving lanes. So we'll show that. And then the last part I'll mention too is Merez Johnson. I think that's what people are going to say, right? Like, well, Merez could do that too. Ben has played longer in college basketball, and I think understands the rotations, the helps a little bit more than Merez. But I've been impressed with Merez on that front as well. Like he has a great awareness of running over to help. And that's good. Like it is good to have that. Like people, like Illinois fans, this is my opinion. It shouldn't be like hey, cast Ben off, get him out. You need, if you want to be the team you want to be, you need Ben Humrichous to be good.
Because what you do offensively, even if he's 1 of 5 for the game, he stretches the court and he allows Kasparas and Kylan and Tommy and Will and all these guys, Trey, to do what they do. Like that, when you get Merez in there, it congests, and like you're talking about with Arizona at Kylan, right? But my biggest thing would, I thought against Northwestern, probably should have got Merez in there for a couple more minutes, right? When Ben was really struggling, you didn't have anybody that could stop him. You needed 1 or 2 stops.
They did for a few minutes, and I just think they didn't stick with it.
Right. So that to me, I thought was just more the coaching decision. I thought you could have tried that. I'm wondering if they, try Trey and Will together at any point against a smaller team. I think that would be interesting to see. And I think Brad, part of him making adjustments sometimes, Mike, because he's got to see it. Like, and he always makes them at some point, but he wants to see what he has. My biggest bone to pick with Ben right now is the rebounding. Like, I need a little bit more out of a 6'9" guy. Like, I know he's not the best rebounder, but he's got 6% defensive rebound percentage. That's just not good enough. Like that should be in the double digits for a guy like that. So that's my biggest thing. I think he's a really important part of this team. And sure, maybe a minute here, minute there, but he's still got to be on the court for 20 to 25 minutes a game.
Yeah, no question. And I agree with the rebounding. I think, and part of that is, on the offensive end, he's spending a lot of time on the 3-point arc. I mean, he's just got to crash. He's got to crash, see if he can get 2 back a game on that side. And then defensively, especially if you're the one that's maybe guarding the non-shooter, you're going to have a little bit of slack in between you and your man to either go meet him for a box out or, take a look at him and say, if he's far enough, like, I just got to go get the damn ball.
Yeah.
And I think because Ben, if you do watch, he's guarding guys that are non-spacers. So there's room in between him. Like, he does focus a lot on going to box out. And I think that's actually taking him away from the basket.
Makes sense.
So it's just like, he just has to find a balance between, like, hey, if I can feel them, yeah, I got to hit and then go get. But if there's all this room in between, hey, long rebounds happen. But if it's a toss up, comes off the glass by the rim, I got to be sticking my nose in there and going to grab it.
Yeah. All right. I think we hit on the hot topics. Just a few more things I'll throw out there. Tomislav Visic's been a way better rebounder than I thought. Like that was his worst game, and he had like 9 and 11 in that one. The post-up game, I'm not in love with. There's some defensive possessions. I think he gets caught in no man's land a little bit. But Jake Davis earning minutes over Kerry Booth right now is interesting. They're spot minutes. I think this is an 8-man rotation for the most part moving forward. And then just need a little bit more from Dre Gibbs-Allhorn. So I'll just throw that out you before we get to the matchup on Saturday. Anything there interest you?
Yeah, I think with Tomislav, all things considered,
it's been great.
Pretty great. Yeah, 12 and 12 in two Big Ten games. Obviously, 36% from 3 on the season from what it was the first couple games when he was kind of hovering in the mid to high 20s from 3. I mean, you're at least making these teams have to guard you in a different way. Because I thought personally, Wisconsin was so paranoid of Tomislav shooting that they switched, and when they switched, that actually helped you offensive rebound.
Mm-hmm.
So it's because you have littles on bigs, and you have bigs on smalls, and so now your speed is to your advantage. So you can see all the ways that he's helping this team. The nitpick with some of the stuff around the rim, I just think he needs to take his time a little bit more. I thought there were a couple times where he like catch the ball on the block and just tries to like rush it up and flick it up on the rim. And I think now he's still whatever he's like, I think he's 66% from 2 this season. So still really, really efficient. But, I do think that if he does finish at a higher rate down there, you're going to see more teams, I think, maybe trying to double him, especially if he gets switches too. And then maybe they're sending 2. So take your time. You don't need to rush a shot up. I think he's a good enough passer to make reads out of a double team. So just take your time. I mean, that's the one thing. You talked about Dre Gibbs-Allhorn, like wanting more from him. It's just, he's a role guy. Yeah. So that's the component of it for me, where it's like his focus just needs to be on the defensive end. Yeah. That's it. I mean, they got plenty of other guys in this team that can put the ball in the basket. Now he needs to definitely be aggressive offensively, but the way what that looks like has to, not be just, hey, I'm not even thinking at all. I just catch it and I catch it and shoot it just because I, right, feel like I have some space. Like being a little bit more, cognizant of where you're at on the floor. I thought he had a really good take to the basket in a big moment in that Wisconsin game. Like that's going to be some of the marginal stuff I think he does. But I'll say it right now. I think there's going to be a Big Ten game where he scores in double figures and gives them a lift. I think he's certainly capable of that. But that's just like the life of a role guy. Like you're just going to have major fluctuation between what your actual counting stats are, but the effort and the energy, especially on the defensive end, has to remain the same. And then you touched on Jake Davis, And it's been fascinating to see him emerge. This guy shot 39% at Mercer, who's, shooting 20% from three this year, 2 for 10, and really is one of his last, maybe 6 or 7, had a big one against Arkansas. But the reason why he's on the floor is because I've said it all the time for years. You've heard me say this, that if the head coach knows exactly what he's going to get from you, that is an advantage for that player. Jake Davis hasn't turned the ball over this season in 47 minutes of play, and has played in high major games. I mean, it's not like he's just coming in and, cigar time. So that's been encouraging, because really what they need is a guy that comes in, plays mistake free, is a mover on the offensive end, plays smart, doesn't turn it over, and then defensively he competes. And I mean, that's just less is more with a guy like him, and he's doing that. So I thought there was less predictability with Carey in that sense. So that's why Jake's getting the nod. So it's not shocking to me, and it's been cool to see him, see him emerge, and I'll be curious to see how long he stays in there.
I know you guys have heard me talk about Home Field Apparel a lot, but there's a reason. I have some of these shirts from Home Field Apparel, and they are a premium collegiate apparel brand based in Indianapolis. And what I love about them is they're focused on creating incredibly comfortable, officially licensed apparel with vintage college designs. So go to homefieldapparel.com and check out their Illini gear. The Flying Illini t-shirt I love. If they have any bomber jackets, go check those out. But you see all of these vintage designs that are great. They kind of stand out in a crowd, but also these are comfortable, well-fitting. They're not the boxy kind of ones you get at the random department store. No, these are well-fitted, comfortable t-shirts and apparel. So go check it out at homefieldapparel.com. Go to the drag down menu, click on Illini, and you'll see all of these great shirts, including Orange Crush, old school Fighting Illini basketball shirts, the Flying Illini t-shirt with the great winged logo, Script Illini gear, including t-shirts, hoodies, an orange ringer tee, the 2004-05 Illinois basketball shirts so you can relive those glory days, but also they have great hoodies, great crew necks, great Illini football gear, including the 80s Illini helmet on there. If you're an old school sweatshirt guy, they got those. If you're a quarter zip guy, they got those. If you want a women's tank there with the Script Illini, they got that. So go to homefieldapparel.com to check out all the great gear they have there. If you're not an Illini fan, they have more than 180 plus growing list of schools. So you can check out all the gear from all over the country. And right now, use code Illini24 for 15% off at homefieldapparel.com. That's Illini24 for 15% off all the gear at homefieldapparel.com. All right, Mike, number 1, Tennessee comes to town Saturday, 4:30 tip-off on Fox. This is a big matchup, and this is kind of what Illinois wanted when they scheduled this. Didn't know they'd be number 1, but you kind of knew Tennessee would be a top 10, top 15 team. What do you think of this matchup? The keys for Illinois, I mean, they've only beaten number 1 when they've been at home, and we'll get to the one you were a part of here in a moment. But what do you think of Tennessee and how Illinois matches up with them?
Yeah, it's the best or probably top 2 defensive team in the country. They are, and Dalton Connect's gone. And so they don't have that type of explosive offensive player, but I think they're probably the most well-rounded they've been offensively since probably their 2019 team that was 3rd nationally in offensive efficiency. So, you go on down the line. Milicic was a guy that they got from Charlotte that they wanted to go out and get a pick and pop 4 guy. He allows them to do that. He's 6'10". He's buying into what they're doing defensively. They go and get Felix Akpara from Ohio State after Adu ends up going to Arkansas. So you fortify that back line again with the rim protection, and they have one of the best luxuries that you have in college basketball, which is a pest on the ball and a rim protector on the back line, because it allows a little bit more margin for error for Chaz Lanier and some of these other guys to defend on the wing. Mashak's really good too, and I just mentioned Lanier. I mean, Lanier is 3-level scorer, pro, has great size, shoots it, over 40% from 3. He's going to be a challenge. So it's a really good opportunity for these guys on the defensive end, especially. But I also think, when you play really good teams, really good defensive teams like Tennessee, you also got to guard. Like you have to guard. You have to get stops. You have to clear the glass because you don't want to face that half-court defense it's just like Northwestern, right? You don't want to face that half-court defense the whole game. So that's something to keep in mind. And then just, some other things. I'd say like my main keys, take care of the ball. This is going to be a really important game for Kasparas to not play with the ball. I mean, you saw him do it a little bit with Alabama. You just got, like, in my personal opinion, to take away the effectiveness of a guy like Zakai Ziegler on the ball, you have to do less. You can't get into the alley drill, meaning like 2 dribble crossover, 2 dribble crossover, 2 dribble crossover. Because that when you start putting the ball in front of him, that's when he starts taking your lunch. And so it's got to be kind of one-track mind for Kasparas when they get the rebound and outlet is like speed dribble to where you can get to that drag, right? If you can keep going to the rim, great, but speed dribble to where you can get him on your back, get to where you want to set up your offense and go. Do not play with the ball. And so that's something too, but it's also great having Kylan Boswell because he can alleviate some of that pressure as well. Last year, you go and play at Tennessee, and it's like Marcus doesn't really look comfortable. Ty's bringing it up most of the time, and you didn't really have, I think, one guy in particular you felt super confident having the ball in their hands. So luckily this year you have multiple.
And the one thing about, that Ziegler-Kasparas matchup, which I think is the most interesting of this game, is the size advantage for Kasparas, right? If he's able to take care of the ball like that, I find that fascinating. And then Tommy against is Akpara going to be on him? Is Milicic going to be on? You can really stretch them out. And obviously the key for Illinois is make your shots, make your threes. But I do think they provide Tennessee one of its biggest, obviously, obstacles so far this season. They've played a decent schedule so far, but Miami's not that great. Baylor's
the biggest challenge.
Yeah, this is their biggest challenge, especially with what Illinois can do offensively, right?
Yeah, it's Tennessee's biggest challenge. It's Illinois' biggest challenge, which is why it's probably the marquee matchup of the day in college basketball with a pretty good slate in college basketball. I know Purdue, Texas A&M, like there's a lot of really good games going on. But yeah, no, you're right. I think how they're going to guard Illinois is going to be fascinating because it could be a big Ben Humrichous game,
right?
Because you think about it,
and that's why I think you keep hearing Brad Underwood, whether you believe him or whatever, he is pouring confidence into Ben Humrichous right now, right? In any press conference he has, because he knows that this guy's gonna be huge this game.
Well, you think about it, it makes it. I think the more you go Merez Tomislav in this game, you may be letting Tennessee off the hook a little bit because you can put Milicic on Tomislav, and then you can just stick Akpara on Merez, and he doesn't really have to chase him around. It keeps Akpara by the rim. This is why I think having Ben out there, you have Akpara probably has to stay on Tomislav because if he doesn't, now you got Akpara chasing Ben on pick and pops, and that's just not. I don't think that's what you want to do if you're Tennessee. So yeah, I mean that matchup's going to be fascinating,
right? Like this game was built for this 5-out offense.
It was, and then on the other end too, just having a good defensive game from Tre White because I think he's going to get Lanier to start. Probably put I would imagine you maybe put Kylan on Ziegler, but Kylan's going to get a shot at Chaz as well. So yeah, I mean it doesn't get any better than this, man. I mean that arena when you get really anybody coming in to the house, but number one team in the country, that place can be juiced.
What is it like to welcome number one team in the country? I mean, you were here the last time Illinois beat the number one team in the country, Indiana, in 2013. So what's it like when number one comes to town?
It's sick for a lot of reasons. I think back to that Indiana game. Indiana was 20-2 at that point. So they had even shown more than Tennessee had at that point to be like, hey, you know what? Indiana probably is the number one team in the country. It was like 4 straight weeks that the number one team had gone down leading into our game. And, we were desperate. We were 2-7 in conference. I think we had lost like 7 of 8 and Tyler Griffey couldn't make a shot. We were kind of questioning our identity as a team. And, you come into that game and shit, it's not like we led wire to wire. I mean, we got down. If I can recall, because I remember sitting there and it's 59-49 and Jeremy Hollowell hits a 3 to make it 62-49. And I remember sitting on the bench. It had just dipped under 10 minutes maybe with the game. And I'm like, God damn, they got us. And then they come down and get a stop. Now they got the ball 62-49. And I'm like, man, if they hit a 3 here, it was getting more into like insurmountable territory. We blow up Yogi's ball screen, get a turnover. DJ comes down and 1, and you start going, okay, 62-52.
People forget about that game because Brandon was so great that year. And Tyler had obviously the game winner. Was how great DJ Richardson was.
DJ was insane. DJ was insane. He came in, he got the N1. Now it's 62-52. Watford turns it over. We come back down. Brandon Paul gets a layup, 62-54, and like crowds getting into it, and they hit another 3. So then it's 65-54, and that was the 3-2 where I'm like, man, we felt like we built momentum, and then DJ just took over on both ends. Garden Oladipo, and then hitting all those mid-range shots. I mean, they had Zeller. We had Zeller in a blender on some of the ball screen stuff, so we just went and set high ball screens with DJ. And he just was making them pay. And then, you get to the end of the game and we run flat 25 curl. And it was a play that honestly, like we didn't get that slip very often. Like the play was for DJ Richardson coming off to the ball side corner. And then it's basically like, hey, if it's very obvious, then dive and slip to the basket. And Yogi and Cody Zeller bust the switch up top. They both follow DJ. And Tyler's like, I got no one. And honestly, it's not an easy shot.
No.
Because he had to almost bring it from his hip with 0.8 left. And it's just kind of a quick, like, Tyler wouldn't do that off. It's a quick, like, flip. It's a great pass from Brandon. He had the angle to the basket. And I just remember, I had the direct line to him where I was sitting on the bench. And I ran up and grabbed Tyler, and I was the second guy to get him. And I think I've told you this before. You've probably seen it. If you go watch it after the shot, I was the second guy to get him because a guy dressed as Goku from Dragon Ball Z was the first guy to get to Tyler. So just crazy. And then just, the court storming. I remember like my brother was under the basket with Riley O'Toole. Like we had known Riley for a long time. So
speaking of Riley, I think he was the first one to get to Brandon Paul.
Brandon, he went over and visited Brandon because Brandon just went and sat down. And just sat down on the side to take it all in.
Brandon had the unbelievable angle pass by Brandon to get that one in. But the other thing I remember is they reviewed whether Tyler got it off. And Brandon Miller, the Illinois assistant, is watching it. And Tom Crean's like, it didn't go in. And Brandon Miller's just staring him down, smiling, just nodding at him. And that will always be indelibly in my mind.
It was one of those that, there's always that indecision sometimes where you're like, shoot, did that get off? And everybody's kind of looking around. It felt good in the moment. Like whatever, I think everybody was so dialed in that everything kind of slows down. And you could just tell, like when he got it off, it was almost like when it was backboard and in was when like that transition of backboard into the basket was when you felt like you heard the horn. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I didn't think twice. I felt like it was good. And dude, everyone storms the court and then it's chaos. Tyler's getting thrown up on Ibi Jimday's shoulders. And I remember a couple guys getting pulled for radio, and Gross got pulled for the broadcast with, to meet with Sean Farnham and Joe Tessitore.
Done it, Tess. They've done it. I still use it.
we go back to the locker room. I may have told this on the pod too, but it's like 7 of us back there. Cause like, again, guys are just pulled in different directions. It's like me, Mike Shaw, Mike Henry, Devin Langford. It's kind of like the bench mob, to be honest. Like we were really the ones that were back there. And Tom Crean's in there. He's in our locker room. So we turned around, we're celebrating, and he's like, hey, great job, guy. We're like, what the hell are you doing in here, man? Like it's because it's not like you walk by our locker room to get to their locker room was on the other side. So like he went out of his way to come in. And I personally always have an issue with that because I think it's I always think it's like more for show. Like
It's
Quanzo Martin did it a few years ago. I forgot where he maybe went into like the Vanderbilt locker room or something when Mizzou beat Vandy and was like, "Hey, guy," and it's just like, it's like a sacred place.
Right.
So that was bizarre. But I will say, last point, I was on the straight and narrow.
Right. That does not surprise me with Tom Crean.
But. No, not at all. Not at all. But I was on the straight and narrow as a high school kid. I was very much like, I didn't want to party. I didn't want to do anything. I was always just like, basketball was so important to me. I didn't want to lose my chance to play Division I basketball. So when everybody was like partying, my brother and I were watching like Mountain West basketball on Friday nights. So when I got to college, I didn't drink.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, I need to focus on hoops. And I was the only freshman trying to like crack the rotation, all that stuff. That was the first night.
Yeah. I was gonna say
that was the first night.
That Cam?
Didn't know what the hell I was doing. Ended up at Red Lion, just like a couple of guys I knew from back in the Chicago suburbs that were in like the Pike fraternity were out, and I'm just, people were passing me drinks and stuff. Horrible following morning, but worth it with all the the cool stuff that we got to experience that night. That was probably a top 3.
I was gonna say
memories for me.
Right.
Yeah, that winning Maui, NCAA tournament, obviously winning the NCAA tournament, and then the Gonzaga win too was, all those were up there. I was super fortunate my freshman year for sure.
That was fun. Thanks for taking us down memory lane, Mike. We appreciate that. And we will catch up next week. We'll have this game to break down and more games for Illinois as they head towards the Bragg and Reds game after that. So, Mike, appreciate the time as always, man.
Appreciate you, man.